Welcome to Journey with Lay podcast. We discuss leadership, culture, and how to take your business to new heights. Your host, Lay Wang, is an adventurer, motivational speaker, and executive coach. Join us each week to learn how you and your team can reach your highest aspirations. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, Lei Wang here, host of this show. This episode is brought to you by Journey with Lei, where I help business leaders create a culture of excitement, build highly engaged teams, and consistently perform at their peak. Start tapping into your powers of excitement. Take your career and business to new heights today. Go to journeywithlei.com or email hello@journeywithlei.com. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Shannon Paulson, who introduced me to today's guest. Shannon is an author, speaker, and one of the first women to fly Apache helicopter in the U.S. Army. Shannon was on our show just a couple of months ago, and I will post a link to that episode in the show note. Today, our special guest is Tammy Barlette. Tammy is the U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. She retired in 2018 as a lieutenant colonel. Upon retiring, she became a professional speaker and founded the Athena's Voice, a speaker referral business featuring female military pilots from around the United States. Tammy served in the U.S. Air Force for over 20 years, assisted and protected troops on the ground in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you have an amazing career in the military, like just hard to imagine. So for a lot of people not familiar, and we all know there's not too many women in military, not to say the fighter pilot. So do you want to share with us how did you start your career? How did you decide to get into the fighter pilot?
Absolutely. It's funny because a lot of the men at pilot training wanted to fly since they were 3, and they went and got engineering degrees and they were just ready to go. And that was not my experience. For me, I grew up truly believing that I could be whatever I wanted to be, but there's a significant power in seeing is believing. And I'd never seen a pilot in person, let alone a female pilot. So I didn't actually even consider it. I was going to college and high school, and I thought I really was interested in the military. I wanted to serve my country, and it just seemed great to me, even though I didn't know anyone in the military. So there was a Navy guy in my class. And so I asked him about it. I said, hey, I'm looking into the military, and I was thinking Navy. And he said, that's awesome. I think you should look into the Air Force. And so I did. I knew that I wanted to go to college, though. So ROTC was going to be my path, especially since I had already had some college done before I actually graduated high school. I didn't want to go to 4 years of the academy. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and I inquired about whether they had an Air Force ROTC program. And they pointed me to the building just behind where I was at. And I went in there and asked about the program, and they explained that I could try it out. I could, look at different careers and get a scholarship. And I thought that all sounded great. And so I joined the program, and honestly, never looked back again, because I found myself surrounded by people who had high level of integrity. They were really trying to do good in the world. They were studying. They wanted to be better. And it was just great to be surrounded by like-minded people. And I was just going to, sign up for the 4 years, and be an intel officer was my plan. And I went to what they call field training, which was in Lackland. It was 4 weeks, living in the barracks, doing obstacle courses and push-ups and marching, all that kind of thing.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, great. Getting yelled at, whatever. It's all good. So there was a career day. There was 200 cadets, and there was a panel, one pilot. And as chances may have it, he pointed at me and he said, are you going to be a pilot? And I hadn't really considered it. And plus I said to him, well, I had knee surgery, so I don't think I can be a pilot. They told me I wasn't eligible. And he said to me, there's pretty much a waiver for everything. And that's truly where it all began. I went back to the detachment and I said, I want to look at being a pilot. I was a gymnast. I was a tree climber. I loved roller coasters. At that moment, it really all seemed perfect. And so I applied, and they found out I didn't even need a waiver for my knee because it was so common, the surgery I had. And I took all the tests and I got a pilot slot and went to pilot training and ended up, ultimately flying fighter aircraft. So that's the story of how I got there.
That's so fun. So how many women were in that class at that time?
Not very many. So there was, I don't know, every pilot training class had about 30 students. And I would say 1 to 3 women in each class, and then even fewer that went down the fighter track. But to me, it's interesting because although I was in the very front of flying fighters as a female, I didn't realize that because women had actually been allowed to fly fighters 10 years prior to when I actually stepped into a fighter cockpit. But because there were so few of us, looking back, I was still in the wave of the first, which seems crazy to me. But I didn't realize that there had been a restriction. I just figured if someone said I was eligible and I was qualified when I attempted the path, and took the tests and all this, that even though there weren't a lot of women, it didn't bother me. It meant that I could still do it. I just wouldn't be surrounded by a lot of my own gender.
So did you find it hard to find a role model or mentor in that situation?
Yes, I would say yes. It wasn't until later in my career when there was an informal group put together called the Chick Fighter Pilot Association. That was truly just some F-16 pilots that were women got together, and they realized that they needed to get more women and fighters together because a lot of us were by ourselves, off in squadrons with no other women. And once that was created, it was so much better because there was people to ask questions, because there are some things that are very particular to being female, especially when you're flying a cockpit that you're by yourself for hours on end. That physically there's different things. And, but there were also some really great male mentors, because it didn't really matter their gender when it came to leadership and flying, but it was more difficult when it came to the whole picture.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, because I have talked to several other great women in military, I got seems like a very common that the women who succeed in military, they recognize the mentor doesn't have to be a woman, doesn't have to be like them. You can seek out the mentors, role models from anyone. So I think that's a great message for a lot of women, for minority in normal professions. Sometimes we say because we don't have the role model ahead of us, we don't find the good mentors. So it's great to look beyond like your current scope, to look for mentors, role models beyond what is visible to you. Thank
Absolutely.
you for that.
And I think that it's important for me, if you ask me who my mentor was, I would I have to think, because really what it was for me was I would figure out what it is I needed. And I would find someone who's good at that or was successful in that area. And so I just found multiple mentors. And when I saw leadership that I appreciated, I would take note. And so I just kind of used the multi-mentor method, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And also that means we don't have to follow the steps of the person exactly who can show us what's the step, because you can synergize the experience lesson from many people, then create your own track, your own steps.
Absolutely. I mean, if you were to just copy one mentor exactly, you wouldn't have the same results and you wouldn't be the authentic you. And I don't think it would work as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And also, as a lot of time, I know you probably one of the very few, or maybe the only one in the room who is described by this or by that. So did you ever have to fight the challenge of say, imposter syndrome or insecurity, lack of confidence?
Oh, yeah. I struggle. In fact, it was such a relief when I think somewhere, I probably was in my mid-20s when I learned that imposter syndrome was a thing. And it made me feel so much better because I realized that it's normal. It's normal to have those doubts. It's normal to think that you don't belong. I mean, whether it's someone like I could be in a room full of women and feel like I don't belong for various reasons. And so it was very helpful to learn about that. And I did struggle with confidence. And so it was something I had to work on. And it's interesting because it's not just something you can just turn on, like, oh, just be confident. I had to find small ways to build my confidence. And some ways were simply like when I was going through some intense training, I knew that if I wasn't going to keep up, if I didn't ask questions. So despite the fact that I didn't want to raise my hand and ask the question because I would think, okay, here I go, about to show everybody how much I don't know and that I don't belong here. But I essentially made a pact with myself. I decided before I went into any of the training that if I had a question, I was going to raise my hand and ask. And that's what I did. And so that may seem like something small, but it's hard to build confidence if you don't have a process. You can't just suddenly have more. So what I did was I just forced myself to ask these questions. And what I realized was that it was building my confidence. And it was helpful too in another way, because a lot of my classmates would come up to me after and they would say the standard thing. I am so glad you asked that question. I was wondering the same thing. So I just kind of disregarded the fact that I thought it was a dumb question. I asked it anyways, So.
Yeah, that's great. Take little steps to
Little steps, yeah.
build your confidence. And also that question you said, when people come and say, oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Actually, that's what we heard a lot, even in boardrooms, because a lot of new leaders, doesn't matter you're male or female or what's the gender, what the color, oftentimes we have that kind of question like, oh, this question will be so dumb, especially at this level of leadership, especially in the boardroom. But the truth is there's another person in the same room. They were saying, thank you for asking this question. So taking the little step and knowing the so-called imposter syndrome or lack of confidence is very common. And also I just noticed, like, so when I was coaching my clients, I find it very effective to reframe this mindset about insecurity or lack of confidence, because so-called imposter syndrome only show up when you are stepping outside your comfort zone, when you're doing something new, something challenging, and everyone experiences that. And the other way to look at it is this is because you are doing something new, something harder. That's why you feel it. Otherwise, you are not making progress. You're just staying in your comfort home, doing the things you're familiar with. Then you never have that issue. So this is exactly happening when you're growing. So that's a great thing. Recognizing that and knowing, okay, this is my opportunity. I welcome that kind of feelings of inconfidence, insecurity, imposter syndrome. That's something I welcome. That's my opportunity.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was in high school, I literally remember telling myself that, okay, well, if the path is getting difficult, that means I'm on the wrong path. I remember telling myself that. And looking back, I'm like, oh, wow, that was so silly. Because I learned quickly over time and joining the military. And if I wanted to be successful, I quickly learned that as long as I set up the proper goal and knew it was something I wanted and it was worth the challenge, that if I stepped down the path of meeting that challenge and it got difficult, it was a very good sign that I was on the right path, because you're not going to grow without challenges. So I took that as a sign that I'm on the right path, instead of taking it the other way, the lack of growth way of, oh, if it's not my path, it's, I'm going to take the easy path. And that sounds so simple, but it's really true. You got to reframe it and go, okay, there's a challenge. I'm going to approach it and I'm going to get past it and I'm going to be better for it. And again, just means I'm on the right path.
Yeah, exactly. And also I want to just tell audience, it's not just a placebo effect, not just you are lying to yourself, trying to say something that's not true. Actually, research after research has shown that is totally true. And even verified by our ancient the wisdom. Like I remember when I was training for Everest, sometimes so painful, I almost want to give up. Mm-hmm. Then that's the time I remember what I learned in high school. Of some ancient stories in China. So I said in Chinese is 天将降大任于世人也，必先苦其心志，劳其筋骨，饿其体肤。就是 what they said is when the God or the heaven going to give you a big breakthrough, present you big opportunity first, they have to test you. Yeah. Make you really exhausted, make you really frustrated, make you try super hard. You probably fail and fail and fail so many times. That's because they're testing you, give you this opportunity. Once you hold on, you persevere, you break through, then the opportunity is yours. That's why not so many people can break through, not so many people can succeed. So when you have that opportunity, you know, oh, I'm the one of the rare people being chosen to be tested and to be given this opportunity to break through.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Absolutely. I mean, because there's a lot of failure that happens before success, you know, and if you label yourself as the failure, that's just a poor mindset. It doesn't define you. It's part of the process. So if you look at failure as learning, which a lot of people are talking about nowadays, but it's just simply true.
Yeah, exactly. For people who never failed, then they probably never succeeded because they never tried anything harder. They're just repeatedly doing the same thing. There's a saying, some people they lived 80 years of life, but actually they just repeated 1 year's life 80 times.
That's interesting. Yeah. And you mentioned the people who have never failed. I dealt with this a lot. When I taught at pilot training, I actually addressed this with every student that I encountered, because what would happen was, in order to get to pilot training, there's all these significant hurdles. I mean, you have to first, graduate high school, then you got to graduate college, the academy or whatever. You need to get selected as a pilot, which means you have to be a high performer. You have to perform physically as well. And so the people who get there typically are very successful people, and they are not used to failing. And what I tell them is that you're now surrounded by a ton of significantly successful people, and somebody will have to be at the bottom. And that may be you. And if you've never been there before, then you need to think about now how you're going to handle it before it happens. It may not be you, but we would talk about that because somebody had to be at the bottom. And it's just something they needed to think about, because many of them had never failed before. And it's so hard when that happens. It's very difficult.
And that's the opportunity, because I think there's another saying, if you are always the smartest person in the room, then you are not progressing.
True. Very true.
Yeah. And also, like in competition, it's so much fun when you start behind, then you catch up with other people, bypass other people. That feeling give you more excitement than you're always running in the front and never see anyone coming behind you. Then you probably don't have that enough motivation to push harder. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the demanding career, and I know you have a family. So would you mind share with us, like, what's your family situation like, and how do you balance family with a demanding career?
I think so. I have 3 kids. They're 14, 13, and 8. And I had the first 2 while I was flying unmanned planes. And then I had the third while I was flying T-38s, which is an ejection seat aircraft. So I was grounded when I had her. And I think that the biggest piece of advice, and this applies to men and as well in different roles, but what I had to do for myself in order to make this happen was really define what a successful mother was, what a successful, pilot was for me, not what society says. And it's more applicable to the mother role. But so for me, I literally in my brain had June Cleaver, greeting her kids at the door with an apron, her hair all done, and baked cookies every day. That's not realistic. And I had to let go of the idea in my mind that that was the only thing a good mom was. but also, the idea that I'll be there, I have to be there for every first, and I'll need to be there for every event that my child has at school, everything that they offer me to show up for as a parent. I had to let go of those things defining me as a good mom, because otherwise I'd just feel guilt all the time. And so for me, it was truly just loving and caring for my kids the best I possibly could. And when I was with them, because it was less than a lot of moms, I would vow to be present. And that made it not easy, but possible for me to accomplish both the fighter pilot role and the mom role, because you can't be distracted when you're flying a fighter jet at 500 knots at 500 feet with another aircraft on your wing, wondering if the kids are okay. You have to redefine what it means. So to pull that role off. And like I said, that applies to any role you have. It doesn't have to be just mom, but what is success for you? And are you ultimately trying to achieve success as defined by society and then feeling like a failure every day, not realizing that that's what you're doing? So if we take success and go, this is what it means to me, this, at the end of the day, I will feel good about what I did. I think your mindset and ultimately your success will help you in the long run. You'll get further.
Yeah, definitely. And that lesson applies to both men and women. But we have to admit, women have more special challenges, because I think I know you had a situation where you have to decide, okay, having kids, being pregnant, and versus a demanding career, advancing your career. So sometimes you have to make a very hard decision. So would you mind to share that story with us?
I will. Yeah. So when I was 5 months pregnant with my second child, I got a phone call from my squadron commander asking me if I was interested in attending U.S. Air Force weapons school in 7 months. And I didn't react to him right away, but inside my brain, I was like, that's insane. Weapons school is essentially the most challenging program. I think the Air Force, not physically, but it's basically the Top Gun of the Air Force, but instead of being 6 weeks, it's 6 months long. And it's where all the elite performers go, and we all train together and go back to our squadrons to be the chief instructor pilot, the weapons officer. And I had never even thought about it, because I just never thought I was that caliber of an operator, of a pilot, to be quite frank. That imposter syndrome, lack of confidence. So there was two things happening. One was like, first of all, I'm pregnant with my second child. And second of all, really, me? And I went to my husband to share with him that night this ridiculous opportunity. And he looked at me and he said, you have to go. You have to go. You can't turn down an opportunity like this. And I thought he was crazy. I said, well, how are we going to figure that out? Because at that point, we'll have an 18-month-old and a 3-month-old. And the training is 6 months long. And he just looked at me again and said, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And that's what we did. It was extremely challenging. Not only is it challenging already, but now I'm away from my children, and one of them only being 3 months old. And I had to deal with, about a month, maybe 2 months before I went to weapons school, my squadron leadership actually pulled me in and said, we're thinking this isn't such a good idea, being that, with your situation and all, like my pregnancy, essentially what I said or what they said. And I looked at them and I said, with all due respect, I applied, I got accepted, I'm going. And I went. And there was a lot of doubts. When I got to weapons school, the instructors, when they found out that I just had a baby 3 months before that, they were like, questioning whether I would succeed. And I was getting questioned as a mother.
Yeah, you're crazy.
Like, what kind of mom would do that? Not only was I crazy, but what kind of mom would do that? But what's interesting is that question doesn't come up for the men. There's plenty of men who have gone away when their baby's 3-month-old. And it's just, a bit of a double standard because of the way we define mom in society. But I went anyways. And it was so difficult for many reasons, but I graduated. And my family was right there when I did. I have a picture of all of us before graduation night. So.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I think many women right now, I think there are two things on their mind. One is, lucky you have a great husband who is so supportive. And two, wow, you are special. You are the one of the very few women who can do that kind of thing, super demanding, that as a normal person in a demanding career have to decide between personal life, family life, and promotion or other opportunities. It's impossible. So what would you say to general population, or say many women who have this question in their mind?
Yeah, well, I'm not Superwoman. I'm just like everybody else. And, the truth is that you can do it. I think a lot of it has to do with the reframing of what does it mean to play that role or be that thing in that moment. And if I left and thought I'm a crappy mom the whole time that I left, then ultimately that would have defeated me. Now, did I have struggles? Oh yeah. Did I feel bad? Yeah. But I kept fighting it and battling back and going, no, this is a decision we already made. I'm not going through that again. I did the decision-making already. And we decided that it was okay. We were going to get through this. And so you can't let yourself get pulled back into the turmoil of that. Now, you brought up something else. My husband, absolutely. He was pivotal. And I know that not everyone has a husband like that, because a lot of times when I mention the story and I speak about it and they say, when can your husband come speak to us? We want to know, how did he do that? What made him want to do that or offer to do that or whatever. He's been amazingly supportive. Has there been challenges? For sure. Because we still carry kind of a traditional role in our household, because it doesn't just switch overnight. It doesn't just switch that, I still do most of the cleaning and most of the childcare just because that's what I grew up with. But we work through it and we make it happen. And he's pivotal. When I talked about defining my role as a mom, what that successful as a mom meant, he had to be on board too. We're a team. So that was pivotal. But if you have that support, you can do great things. You just have to redefine the success for you in that moment. And remember not to let yourself go back into the deciding phase of, should I really do this? Like, once you make the decision, you got to let that go. That will tear you away from, I think that's when you're closest to your goal. That's the thing that's going to tear you away. If you start questioning if you should really be there, if you've already done it, don't do it anymore. You've decided it was worth the struggle.
Yeah. A lot of decision looks really hard when you're right in the moment. But if you have this mindset that once you made a decision, stick to it. And years later, when you look back, you're going to find, anything, if once I made a decision, I can pull through and things not that bad as you imagined.
Absolutely. You are spot on, because that's why I talk about knowing your core values, setting a goal. And if you've put this goal of yours through the ringer of it matches my core values, it is something I want to do, it's worth the struggle, then you need to not go back to the deciding phase again. You need to have that no quit mentality. And one of the examples I use is, if I'm flying my plane, and that's my mission, right? So that's my goal. I'm flying my plane, and my oil system starts to just crap out. It's, my engine's going to seize any second. If I sit there and stare at that oil gauge and stare at that problem only, going, how much does this sucks? This sucks. I want to quit. What's going to happen? The plane will crash. I mean, I know that seems very simplistic, but if we apply that in life as well, so that's my problem. Oh my gosh, I have a problem. I need to go look back at the big picture again, keep my cross check of life going like we would in an aircraft, look outside, look at the other instruments, go back to the problem because it's there, and deal with it. And how often you go back and how long you stay on that problem will depend on the problem, but you cannot just stare at it. I call that being situation focused versus mission focused. You need to pull yourself away from that thing because it'll suck you in, and you can't let it, or you'll lose perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also the mindset shift. where do you focus is where you're heading. Like in climbing, a lot of time, like when I get into a situation, I think, oh, I may fall here. Oh, I may not be able to get through this if I keep on looking down and say, okay, if I fall, what's going to happen? Oh, what's the chance I'm going to fall? Then I'm pretty sure I'm going to fall. So I have to look up, see, okay, what's the next step I can make? What's the best way I can make the next step? What's the safest way I can make the next step? That's all I'm focusing. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure things will be different today.
Yeah. And there's another analogy I use that you will absolutely appreciate, I think, is that one thing I like to say is, you got to look at your goal, the top of the mountain, right? That's our goal. I want to get there. You have to go, I want to get there. But if you stare at that as you're trying to accomplish what you're accomplishing, you can very easily, as you know, go, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get there. Look how far that is. I haven't gotten anywhere. But if you go, okay, that's my goal. I'm going to put it away for a second. I know I'm going there. Let me walk up to this tree. Okay, I'm going to go to that rock. And then, and then every once in a while, stop, turn around. Wow, look how far I went. This is amazing. Like that's the small step concept. And I know you know about that.
Exactly.
I've never climbed.
Yeah, no, actually, every time when I was standing in front of the next big mountain, I would look at, oh my God, this is so big. How long is that going to take? But then I didn't know, okay, forget it. Just talk to yourself to say, all right, I'm going to go forever because I know it's going to be long. So every step I move forward will be one step closer. That's it.
That's
I
awesome.
think accumulate it one step to another. Eventually I get there. Just be prepared to go forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also you talk about the setting the right expectation for success. Like I know as someone who we wouldn't say you succeed all the time, but definitely you are super driven for success. But sometimes you may have to scale back, have to adjust. So how does the successful leader adapt their definitions of success?
Well, gosh, I think it depends on what you're specifically working on, but I think that you can't just have a definition of success and be done with it. So for example, when I was a young pilot, I wanted to be a fighter pilot and I achieved that goal and I plan to keep going down that path. And then in 2006, I had cervical spine reconstruction due to an aircraft injury. And it ended up working out that I transitioned into the Air National Guard full-time to fly unmanned platforms, which, to be very honest, was something I never thought I would do. And when I was a young pilot, lieutenant, very young, they were brand new, we would make jokes about it. You're going to be a UAV pilot. But the truth is that when that happened, and my image of success was flying fighter jets and being a 2-ship flight lead, 4-ship flight lead, squadron commander, I had to shift because I decided that the unmanned platform, because of my neck surgery and I was about to get married and wanted to have kids, all that was the best option for both me and the Air Force. And so I took it. And now I had to redefine what that meant. What did success mean? Now, I'm not going to be a 4-ship flight lead anymore because I'm not flying a fighter aircraft. So what can I do in this role to be the best that I can be to help ultimately the US and, whatever the mission is, and to do that. And I think that, it's just a matter of adjusting it for each situation. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you have to.
Yeah, so sometimes when we step away from the original goal, doesn't mean it's a failure. Doesn't mean we don't have what it takes to get there. It's just sometimes the road is not a straight line. We have to get around. And a lot of time when you look back, you're going to see the detour actually give you other experiences you never expected.
Yep.
And later on, to make you more well-rounded, make you have more diverse skill set that set you up for bigger success.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of success for me is defined by my, how have I look back and how have I acted and been in that role? Did I do my best with it? Did I treat people the best? Did I give my all? And I think it's when people don't feel like they're meeting those check boxes that they feel like a failure, where they look back and go, well, I didn't really give it my all, and they know it. So, and that puts them in a hard spot, because now you have to figure out how to get yourself out of that rut of feeling like a failure when you didn't meet your own expectations. So you have to know your own expectations. I mean, you can't just sit there and go, I want to be a fighter pilot, but have nothing else behind that. There needs to be more to it, and your why.
Yeah, exactly. And also that tied into, like, in coaching, a lot of time we say the goal is not a criteria of you succeed or not. It is the effort. Are you growing in this journey? Are you making progress every day? Are you trying your best with every effort? And that makes you successful. It's not reaching that line or not. That line, maybe the line set too high, not realistic. Or maybe that line set too low, you reach it so easily. Doesn't mean you're successful. So
yeah, I think about when I was instructing in pilot training, I remember, young pilots would have the goal of being a fighter pilot. And sometimes very early on, it was apparent that wasn't going to happen for them. And they needed to redefine what they wanted, especially when they didn't get it. But what's interesting is if I put myself in their shoes, it feels like failing. And sometimes people would want to quit. I want to get out of this. They feel like quitting is this, like, I'll just slip away and no one will ever know. But when you look at it from the perspective that I saw, from the instructor's perspective, if I saw a student that was struggling and could barely land the plane, but they were working and they were trying and they had a good attitude, all of us instructors would do everything we could to help them reach that goal and ultimately be successful. Maybe not defined like when they originally came, but successful nonetheless. But the ones that would give up and want to quit or, have a bad attitude, we didn't really pour any extra into them. And I always like to say to people, if you're going to hire someone, work with someone, would you rather work with and or hire a failure or a quitter? And I, every day, would choose the failure, because failure often comes before success. But quitters often just keep on quitting. I want to know someone is in it for the long haul and they will keep going. So.
Yeah, that's exactly the one of the saying is the people who succeed is the one who didn't give up. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So my saying is I will fail out before I bail out. So bailing out like is ejecting from an aircraft. That's my analogy. But so that's what once I decide on that goal, and like I said, I've been through the goal setting process and it's a good goal. I'm not pulling that ejection seat handle. I am going to keep going. I mean, unless something crazy happens, there's always it depends, I'll give you that. But for the most part, don't let that quit even seep into your brain. It's like poison, the thought of quitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know a lot of people who are very driven for success or leading a very challenging organization in a time of so much stress. A lot of time it's hard to say, okay, I need to slow down, need to take care of myself because there's so many people waiting for me. This is a very demanding job. There's no time to take a break. And I know in military, no matter when you are training or you're at work, it's super stressful, high demanding. So how do you give yourself that be okay to take some time off? Otherwise, I bet you don't have the balance you're talking about, right?
No, you don't. And I mean, just like any runner who runs, I mean, eventually you got to take a break. You can't, you're just going to go forever. Or you lift weights. You give, like, if you lift arms one day, you're not going to lift arms every single day. You need to give the muscles a break so they can develop and grow again. And we need to do that for our minds as well. I mean, so I did it better in pilot training than I did the rest of my career. But in pilot training, I didn't touch a book on Saturday. I did not study on Saturday. And I didn't realize, I was kind of young and this sounded like a good idea, and didn't really realize it was, self-care and taking care of my mind. Because when it comes to anything, like the sports psychologist Michael Gervais would say, there's body, craft, and mind. So we can train our body. A lot of people do that, physically to fly an airplane or whatever it is you're doing. Your craft for a pilot, it would be, flying and studying and knowing the stuff. But a lot of people leave out the mind aspect. It's still 1/3 of the picture. And if you want to just blow it off, it's going to be detrimental to you. So I would personally take time, and like currently I meditate every single morning. Took me years to really realize how to do it, because I didn't really understand for a long time. But I finally got a good instructor. I went to Ziva online, and it was great. And it's been great for my mind and clearing it out. And the other thing too, for me, is that I think one of the things that's very helpful is that, remember how I said that when I spent time with my kids, I would be present. So that's what I do. I'm present with my children. And instead of seeing that time where we're running around, making dinner, going to sporting events, driving in the car for 2 hours every night or whatever, instead of seeing that as negative, another thing I have to do, I reframe it as, this is not work. This is time with my family. They're not going to be here forever. And I'm going to be bored when they leave in 10 years or wherever they are, I am going to enjoy this time. And so I think that reframing that time of my day as a positive instead of a burden, like a lot of people do, another thing I got to do, I'm so busy, the reframing of it is just powerful.
Yeah, reframing. And also the thing about yes, making money, growing a business, leading a team, career growth, everything is important. But the foundation is our health, our healthy mind, healthy body, healthy family, healthy relationship. Without that, you don't have a foundation to go for any ambitious goal.
Yeah, it's true.
And Tammy, so what's ahead of you now? You are retired. What's the next?
Next, I actually have a next.
Mm-hmm.
I have my speaking business. So I speak myself, provide keynotes, and specifically on a mission-focused mindset. And I also have a speaking business, as you mentioned, Athena's Voice. And so that's just a referral business where people can find, there's 9 of us female pilots listed there, and I connect people with the best speaker for their event. And I am currently in the process of getting certified as a mindset and performance coach with a focus on athletics, but it's not going to be just for athletes. I wanted to add that in there because I want to be able to help like the high schools around my local area and stuff with mindset, because I think it's very important. So I'm adding a mindset coaching aspect to my business. I'm really excited about that because it goes right along with my keynote on mindset and having a no quit mentality. So
that's exciting. So how do people find out more about you?
I think the best place is for me, if you want to get in contact with me, is on LinkedIn, and it's just under my name, Tammy Barlette. I also have my business website, which is Athena's Voice USA. So Athena as in the goddess of wisdom and war, voice as in speaking. So athenasvoiceusa.com. Those are probably the best ways to reach me.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you for sharing so many valuable advice, insights, and I hope everyone has a lot of things to take away from today's conversation.
Absolutely. It was great speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy, and thank you everyone for tuning in. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Journey with Lay. What's your most valuable takeaway from today's episode? What is one step that you are inspired to take? Start tapping into your power of excitement and become the leader you are always meant to be. If you dare to dream it, you can achieve it. Go to journeywithlay.com or email hello@journeywithlay.com. We'll see you again next week.